Hello, noticers, and welcome to today's episode with Kevin Kraft. Hi, Kevin. Welcome.
Maggie, hi Urvi. So nice to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
So, Kevin is my friend, but he is also a musician, sound healer, and children's book author of Om. Kevin is the sounder and founder of Soundchala, which is a unique mindfulness curriculum combining music, breathwork, movement, and meditation to help achieve the mindful benefits of a sound yoga practice. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
Oh my
Kevin?
gosh, so much to add. But I'm sure we'll dig into all of that in the podcast. No, that's a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I wanted to ask you to start because I heard you share this story and I thought it was fascinating about your introduction to sound or your first experience at a concert with sound that moved you in such a way. I think you were either at a Krishna Das concert or someone and something happened and you were like, I need to study this and share this. But I would love to start there just to get kind of a background on what it was that really moved you into this space to begin with. So if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. It was about 15 years or so ago. I had already been a yoga instructor for a few years. I got into yoga from a back injury, and just it saved me so much that I went on the path and got trained as a teacher. So there's a few years of exposure to the world of yoga, but no music at all, or very, 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 very little music. Except picking the playlists, in the class. Then I think it was 2008. I went to a Krishna Das concert. Krishna Das is an American rocker, I think in the 60s that started on the path and got into following a guru and opened up this world of chanting. So he's probably the most iconic American chanter, bringing these beautiful ancient Indian mantras to the West, and they feel different. Even though they're ancient mantras, they're coming from a kind of a Western rocker in this person. So I had never been to anything like this before, and it was about 3,000 people in this hall, and I was there by myself. And something happened. These mantras that Krishna Das and so many of these devotional artists chant are quite simple and repetitive. So they're easy to fall into this. There's a movement, there's a repetition, evolution that happens in the simplicity and the number of sounds, and you get lost. But it's one thing to get lost in music, but there was something else that happened. There was this like sweetness in the air. There was like you could almost taste the music. There was a room of everyone singing together, and I would guess that definitely more than half had no idea what they were singing. Right? They had no idea what the meaning was. They probably had never been to a Krishna Das concert, so it wasn't like, hey, I've been to 100 Grateful Dead concerts. I know every single lyric. This is, mostly a new experience for everyone in Hawaii, including myself. And there was this sweetness. And I remember going outside after the end and just looking at the stars above the palm trees on a warm Hawaiian night. And I said, I don't know what the heck that was, but I want to figure that out and then offer it. Later, I found out that was the NAAD, NAAD. NAAD is a Sanskrit word that means sacred sound current. And like a current in the ocean, if you fight it, you'll tire and, if nothing will work. You have to surrender to the current in order to go with the flow, in order to get out of the way of yourself, I'll say. And be swept away. And so this sacred sound current is, it's alive everywhere. It's alive in each and every one of us. It's alive in, I think, all kinds of music. But what happens in devotional music, the simplicity and the repetition really allows us to turn off our minds and then experience this sacred swimming, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is my echo? Orvi, do you have your echo turned off?
I do.
Okay, now it's not echoing. Okay, thank you for sharing that. I haven't experienced anything. Well, there was like one sound healing I would say that I did, and it was one of my first ever sound healings, and it was a similar experience of being very transcended into just a different place. And I would say I was someone who would always be very frustrated with guided meditations or this idea of like deep relaxation because I felt like I could never get there. And sound did bring me there. So that's interesting to hear. There's a technical term and a scientific term for it. So, or the Sanskrit term, not, scientific. But that's really beautiful. And I'm curious. So, what was your first step? You're like, oh, I got to figure this out. What did you do? Where did you go next?
Well, fortunately, when we get clear on things align.
Mm,
And I had already planned it was a leadership retreat, more along the lines of personal development and not yoga based at all. And I was at this, it was a 7-day retreat, and there was a gong master doing gong meditations
mm,
outside in a labyrinth on this retreat center. And this person offered it every day, and I got to experience this. And I was laying down on asphalt. It was one of those asphalt labyrinths, and I didn't have a yoga mat, and so it wasn't the most comfortable environment. And there wasn't any movement, as I think it's super important to do movement before a sound bath. But we just laid down, and I think she only had maybe one. Yeah, it was one gong, and something happened. Once again, I was like, I journeyed, and I don't think at that point I had ever really transcended myself and journeyed very quickly. So luckily, I got to know her over the week. Her name is Barbara Cole, and realized that, oh my gosh, gongs are a major solution to the blockages of meditation.
mm,
Um, I had already been a yoga instructor, and asking people out in public, do you do yoga? And people would always say, no, I'm not flexible.
mhm,
It's like a pocket answer in our
mhm,
society. It's just like, and I've heard that same response so often, it's been jarring. And the same thing with meditation is like, hey, do you meditate or do you have a meditation practice? And the pocket response is, I can't.
mhm,
So it's I'm not flexible. Meditation, I can't. And
mhm.
that's a really strong word, right? So my mind just, got super fascinated by that conundrum, right? And then here comes the gong. The gong seemed to do a lot of the work. I didn't even have to try to meditate. It it meditated for me.
Yeah.
And then I learned on what happened. And the gongs are, my favorite instruments, what I've structured my entire sound experience around, because they're so effective on quieting the mind, 50 to 60%. What happens is we have such active thoughts all day. We're doing, thinking. And that, if you look on a brain graph, it's busy, it's fast, right? And it makes perfect sense that this hyperactivity causes stress in our body. So we spend so much time in this beta wavelength state that we don't have the opportunities in our society to spend time in alpha and theta. Uh, and when we get into deep sleep at night, we go into delta, but we spend so much time in beta, and then we crash into delta. And we're not being creatively and conscientious about this time in these creative, um, unifying states. So the gong does that really, really effectively. And so gong led to one instrument after another over the last 15 years, but it was really the gongs that left such an impact on me.
Mm.
And I love that part. So like part of me, and I know Maggie is too, like we are connected to also like sort of the brain science around why things are happening. And I feel like you're describing that here beautifully and in such a tangible way, right? Because I often hear with even my clients where I hear like I can't meditate, and I hear that I can't too. And actually is more like what I hear. I agree with you with the yoga. It's like I'm not flexible, and I'm like, well, yoga is about strength actually and stabilizing. So there's something different that we're working. And then the other piece of it, which is like about I can't meditate, usually is I can't meditate, I can't sit still. And it's like, and then we all like kind of learn as we deepen our meditations, right? Like it's not really about stillness in the way that we think. It's not in the stillness of thought. It's in the observation. Does you know what I mean? And that's where the stillness comes through. If that like, and so that is supportive. I've seen people when I've able to share it that way where they see it so differently and then they can kind of participate or engage with it and then shift the way that they engage with it as well, furthering or deepening their practice of it. And I feel like with sound giving an access point to that is so beautiful too. And I haven't, heard it in terms of these wave states necessarily, even though, I definitely agree and subscribe to, like, I know what happens when I listen to certain music or certain frequencies of music where like I know this way that my brain is functioning differently. I may not be able to describe it, but I can immediately feel it. And I completely agree with you where I'm like, oh yeah, like sound just gets you there. Like and you're saying gong, but I'm like, sound totally does get you there so much faster. And it's a whole body experience sometimes where like sitting in meditation isn't, right? You like the relaxation, like the ease and the stillness is just so deep. I feel like when I'm in a sound experience. And
Yeah.
so I just want to say thank you with all that saying like thank you for explaining it in the like the wave states because I think that's so critical for us to understand, that we have access to all of those and it's not hard to access necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part is just being aware that we have these states and that they're happening at all the time. It's not like it's just one brainwave state, right? So we've got these five brainwave states happening all the time, and just being aware of like what affects that, you know? Like, can you be aware of like, wow, my mind is spinning? We can say that, but then it's like, well, maybe I should do an activity that promotes more time in either alpha or theta. And and this also connects with just knowing our minds better, right? I think if you ask any human on the planet, do you believe everything you think? I think every single human would answer absolutely not, right? So we have this inherent understanding that we think things that aren't true. We follow things emotionally that aren't true. We get hooked on thought patterns that do not serve us. And at least the way that I was raised before I found yoga practices, it's like, what do you do about that? How do you even start accessing dissolving thought patterns? And of course there are so many tools, but sound is the best way to slow things down and to be that observer, like you stated earlier. Like this is observation is something that we just don't see very much of, you know.
The mental reprieve that can come when you actually have moments of like, just stillness in the mind, and that did like it's come in a few sound experiences for me, like for sure. But it's such a beautiful moment of like, oh, I think I was out. You don't like you kind of lose track of time in that state, but it's like, oh wow, I was like shut off, and that feels amazing because yeah, we can just drive ourselves crazy. And I've been thinking about this a lot just on this new program that I'm coming up with, and there are so many tools, right, for how to either neural pathways, like what different kinds of thought work could be, and it just is becoming aware, but how much the body also how much the body holds, like in terms of like depending on where you are in your own kind of, I don't know, healing journey or what have you, depending on the level of trauma that still exists within your body. Like how could something like sound, so say you're a person, I don't know if you've studied any of this, Kevin, but like say like PTSD, for example, like people who are in a state of fight or flight or high anxiety, like what it like instinctively, I'm like, I imagine sound would be a pretty safe space for someone like that, but I'm not sure if you have any more knowledge on that. You?
Yeah, absolutely. So sound, one thing first and foremost I love about sound is there's no dogma attached. There's no storyline. There's something, the neutrality about a sound. Yeah, you may like it, you may not like it. It may be resonant, it may be dissonant, but it's pretty much void of story. So that's a really big part of like taking the mind out of it. So, and then sound, like color or temperature, is energy, and it's amazing with what certain sounds can elicit in terms of an opening, of an awareness, of a release, of a clearing. At the end of most of my classes, most people, it takes a while for their brainwave states to come up, and feel comfortable talking. So I usually start by just asking people, with a show of hands, of how many people felt a significant temperature change in the sound bath, how many people saw colors, how many people had back cracks, like literal, like during, just from sound. This is not from any of the movement. How many people had an old injury come up, or speak to them? How many of them had a clearing? So I go through these, and it's fascinating of how energy gets expressed in everyone's experiencing a different way. And some people stay stuck in their mind. It's not 100% thing, but a lot of people will experience one, if not several, effects energetically of sound moving through them. So in terms of your question about PTSD, and as like these traumas are stored in our bodies, it's often because we've shut them down, that they're stuck and locked away, that they can't be released or healed. So sound is this neutral component of opening up the body in a very safe environment to begin to feel, to begin to be aware of what may be locked or hidden. So it definitely helps that. Yeah, for so many people.
Yeah.
It
And I feel
truly is that. I mean, I just kind of like what you started off by, talking about like the current. It's like just what you shared makes it feel so much like it's truly a current, right? Like it's truly a current that can heal, that can just, it has the power to do almost what thinking cannot, right? Like it really does. And that mind body connection is transcended through the sound, which is what we're saying, but I'm just saying it another way, I guess, because that's how it's coming up for me. And I'm like, yeah, it's like exactly how that your body feels it. Because we all been in meditation, we've all been in different types of, healing or nurturing modalities. And I'm like, yeah, I just feel like in a sound experience or a sound bath, I'm like, oh yeah, like it's total body, like right away.
One thing
yeah.
that's really fascinating too is the opening up to sound that happens, in sound baths. It's like if people came in and laid down, and I just bang on the gongs, the to the same level, like when I work my way up there, it would be such a shock to everyone's nervous system. Um,
Mm.
it's crazy, but through all of the practices, the yoga, the kriya, the chanting, we prep the body, and we start with very curated sounds, and we get loud, like we get really loud, and it's the nervous system actually craves it.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just fascinating because we don't really think of ourselves as opening up to sound, right? We as humans don't have the ability to turn off sound. We have to hear everything around us. Even if we, stick our fingers in our ear, right? We cannot turn off sound. And one thing that's like super amazing is we don't just hear through our ears. We hear through our entire bodies because hearing is feeling too, right? There's a movement, and then if you cymatics is the physical representation of sound, and if you look at sacred geometry, and if you look at musical notes or the call of a dolphin, or if an opera singer sings the note of C, they're always sacred geometrical patterns in the water, and we are
Mm.
water. So all of this is like, it's like you really have to kind of look down and what's happening, because everything is vibrating. We're vibrating upon millions of vibrations in the room. Um, I think it always goes back to this concept of like, we always know how to heal. We are our best teachers. We have all the tools inside of us to heal ourselves. And if we think in terms of frequency, by by providing all of these sacred frequencies in a room, our body will then hopefully entrain to a higher vibration or a more stable vibration, and that's how healing or feeling can occur. So it's just a lot of components that in this world of sound that we can't turn off.
I'm thinking as you say all that about nature sounds, right? Like just how birds in the morning affect me in such a peaceful way, or even if you just find yourself in this beautiful, like nature, and like the silence also has a vibration, right? Like, like the kind of like the peace of that was kind of what I was feeling as you were speaking, of just because even for if people don't have and sound baths are becoming more and more popular, and you can find recordings online. I would assume that it's always a bit better to be in person with it, but even just noticing the sounds that make you feel like make you feel, because we take a bit of it, I don't want to say for granted, but like you said, we're hearing things all day, like where it's usually the other people's voices or music, like whatever music we may not resonate with or may not be super high frequency, so we tend to tune out some of the other sounds that bring us a feeling of more peace, but those are here too. And just hearing you speak was bringing me to that place. So it's funny. It's cool to like connect with that and be reminded of that, and just how like meditative it can be, but also how calming on the nervous system, right? Like I'm in this like study mode of anxiety and like, so I'm like bringing up PTSD and all this stuff, but this is it is such an accessible tool to help calm us down, right? Like I think it's an accessible tool to help us feel more peace, in our day to day.
And I think, if we as humans can cognitively connect the dots and say, my brainwave states, my mind is spinning. I like, what's something that's going to help me get into alpha? Spending time in nature. I would imagine, like, if you were hooked up to some brain sensors, just like, I would say within probably 90 seconds being out in nature, you would see a complete shift in brainwaves. And so we're also thinking of brainwaves, which, our heart is electromagnetic, our brain is sending out waves. This is all information, right? This is all data and frequency going out in the world. So yeah, just connecting with like the alpha state or the theta state with time and nature. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears and ask you about, because you also express, like, in addition to doing, the sound baths, it's also a personal creative expression for you, just because I know you personally, and you'll use sound as a way to, I don't know, you said you kind of use it sometimes for your own healing. Like, I know that you write songs and you'll do your own kind of little jigs just to either move through something difficult in your life. So did that come to you after you started researching, or is that something you always did? Did you always like to create music, or did that come to you like in this process?
No, this is all very new and
Mm,
very like exciting and surprising.
mm,
It's our voice is our main way of self-expression. In my
mhm,
personal journey, I've had to really rediscover my voice. The voice I felt I lost as a child. I had to, as an adult, piece it back together one at a time, and it like to look at myself now, and the things that I'm doing. I look back to a younger version of myself, and I go, "My gosh, how the heck am I doing what I was so afraid to do?"
mm,
I developed a sense of humor early on, as a coping mechanism, but it was always in small groups. I always felt good in small groups. I could make anyone laugh. Like once it would get over like six people, I would just shut down. Um, and now I teach classes to over 100 people, and I'm singing, in front of people, which, um, love my dad dearly, but every time I would sing growing up, he would say, "Don't quit your day job," you know. And even though that's not that harmful, it left a mark.
yeah,
So um, so I really so it's all new and super exciting, but I really attribute it to um, diving into self awareness and diving into mantra. I think mantra practices. I think chanting to Saraswati. Being very clear that I want music to flow through me. I want to be an organic musician. I want things to come out of me, even if they're not perfect. I want to be a model for people to say that you can sing imperfectly, and you don't have to be polished. This is so healing, and like our voices are our built-in instruments, and we use them every day. And if you can talk, you can sing. And this whole concept of being tone deaf is like, I think only 1 to 2% of the population is actually tone deaf. Like
mm,
we don't need these excuses. We just really need to give people permission to sing imperfectly.
yeah,
And I love mantras because it's a different language and they're simple, and I don't have stories around them. And they're power packed. It's a vibrational language, and they all have these amazing concepts that if we spend time looping on concepts that will enhance our lives, we're speaking to our subconscious, and
mm,
these get expressed. So
mm,
And I just want to echo just you saying, we can sing imperfectly. I'm like, we can just be imperfect, right? And I think because as you were speaking about your voice and sort of reconstructing it after, it felt lost, it's sort of like, I think about that for so many people. Even my own journey, it wasn't really around singing, but it's like, or even the definition of your voice and your expression. And I think, so many people spend time trying to perfect even what they want to say, when it's like a lot of it gets perfected as you say it, and so it like doesn't really come, it doesn't happen perfectly within yourself, but it happens almost perfectly outside of yourself in a orchestra of the other noises or voices that are occurring, right? Because as you put your voice out, has a gravitational pull, a frequency that attracts others, and then it's like together in unison in that orchestra, like, do you create? And I think we can create individually as well, but I just think it's such a fascinating concept that you're kind of bringing forward in your story through talking about singing imperfectly, like that's okay and that's enough. I love that.
and it's like it's just as adults, right? Because I think about my nieces all the time. They sing when they want to sing, they dance when they want to dance. I'm like, what happened? Like, how do we get so far off? And like to your point, Kevin, it's like just rediscovering like the joy and like the playfulness and the expression, and it's like just sing if you want to sing. Like but for so many of us, myself included, like even you saying, Orvi, like crafting everything I want to say, we just become so, I don't know, whatever. There's a million words to say conditioned, but like simple human nature, right? Just gets so stunted so soon. And it's just so frustrating.
Yeah. And I was like, I shared with Kevin before about Kai, like my oldest son, and he sings. I was like, I've never really been moved so much by it. Like I do love music. I love singing. I love all of that. But when I hear him sing, there's something instantly in me where I'm like, this is like angelic. It's like so
Mm-hmm.
amazing. And Bodhi, I like, hopefully when he listens to this, he is supported in the future. But he probably has, like my husband says he has, him and Kai have like a voices that are, maybe more in that harmony or the angelic kind of, and I definitely don't, and I don't think I'm tone deaf, but it's, whatever. I still sing, I don't mind. And Bodhi, my younger one, like, it's like, honestly, it's like the most beautiful thing and like the funniest thing ever because it's not like the other, I guess. I don't want to have like a true comparison, but I'm like, yeah, if you were to, does not care. He's unabashed about the fact that like he sings and like, it's like, I don't want to say nails on a chalkboard because it's amazing too, but it's like when you hear it's like squeaky and it's the most beautiful noises too. And I was asking him, I said like, what, oh my gosh, like what do you love to do like the most? And he's like, oh, like I was like, and we do this game like, like would you rather, or we now changed it to like, would you like would you like to dance or would you like to sing? And he's like, oh, sing. And he's like, the best thing about me is singing. And I'm like, yes, it really is, and it's so funny because he does not care. He's 4. He's like, I sing equal. Like he has no comparison. He's like, and sometimes he's mumbling the words because he has no idea what the word actually is, but he's like showing up strong. He's like, I'm the best singer. And I'm like, you sure are, like you are the best singer. I'm gonna record it and send it to you guys.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll add it to the pod, but I don't know.
Absolutely.
So cute.
Freedom, right? It's this like freedom of expression. That's just an openness. Can I share one thing that like a big dot connector with music and singing and, keeping in mind those brainwave states. We do sound healing certifications and we bring in experts in different fields. So a couple of weeks ago, we had David Forrest and a genius, and he came and talked about music and the effects on the brain. But it's amazing to see how much music interplays with different areas of the brain that we don't normally use, and how memory is affected with music. Just like the circuitry with music is fascinating. And then just yesterday we had Dina Cam, who is a voice singing coach, and she basically spends most of the time on just focusing on the diaphragm. She says, I love it. She says, the heart gets so much attention. The heart has, it's on cereal boxes. It has emojis in every color. Everyone talks about the heart, heart, heart. But it's really the diaphragm that is doing all of the work. And it's a huge muscle. And it also, as I connect this to yoga, just sits on top and stimulates the vagus nerve, which is right next to the solar plexus. And in yoga, we talk a lot about the bridge between the heart and the solar plexus and having enough action and oomph to put love out to ourselves and the world. So when we sing, and most people don't know this, I really invite everyone just to try this. As you inhale up, you're pushing your diaphragm down. And yoga is all about this polarity, right? And we're right. Same thing in singing. Singing is yoga. As we inhale, we're pushing in this part right before your sternum. There's like a soft area, but your diaphragm goes all the way around your rib. It's like an upside down bowl. And as you push that down, you're stimulating your vagus nerve and your solar plexus, which engages your parasympathetic nervous system. This is why singing feels so good, So it's really healthy, and it's lighting up our brains, So just so much is happening that we're not even aware.
Wow. So you're saying, so with the diaphragm, it goes down as you breathe in.
Yeah, you're well supposed to. Like most
Yeah.
of us breathe ineffectively. We're
Right.
shallow chest breathers, and there's no downward push on the diaphragm at all. So what happens is the diaphragm atrophies and is not stimulating the vagus nerve and the solar plexus.
So what can people do? Do you have some tips for how people can start to relax that?
Get to know the diaphragm. Just really Google, YouTube, Dina Can, Deena, last name Kamm. Get you her website. She's an amazing teacher. Just really spends a lot of time on the anatomy of the diaphragm. It's like, oh my gosh. And I come at it from a yoga perspective, like a lot around the Manipura, our city of jewels, our solar plexus, our sunshine. And yet that's not really part of our culture to talk about. Like, why is it called the solar plexus? Why in Sanskrit is it called the city of jewels? These are named thousands of years. Maybe we should explore that.
Mm. City of Jewels. I didn't know that.
Mm.
Me neither. I always wondered why it was called solar. Like like that word feels interesting to me, like solar plexus. Like I'm always like, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't like necessarily connect with it when I hear the word, just the words. And so that's so fascinating. What is the Sanskrit word for that?
Manipura.
Manipur. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I was like, interesting, because I'm trying to like connect that.
Yeah, and so money is like jewel or gem, and then sunshine. So a lot of Sanskrit is there's some leeway because it's vibrational on what the
Right.
translation is. So I personally can connect the dot between solar and sunshine and brightness,
Right.
and the shine or allure of a gem, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I didn't know this. I was like with a former Taoist monk, I guess is the best way, this weekend. And he was like, interestingly enough, he was like, Sanskrit is the only dialect that is unadulterated. Like it has not had any shift. It's still preserved in full, its purest form as it was, right? Like we see how English has changed over time, right? If we said like, hey, y'all, to somebody in like the 1900s, they'd be like, what are you talking about? But Sanskrit, it's so like in that vibrational containment, it's purest because it has no linguistic or dialectical like deviation.
Not a lot of Sanskrit slang. Yeah.
No, there's not. I mean, and I was like, I'm Hindu, Vedic, like, in our Vedic scripture, like Sanskrit, like, right, where there isn't, you're just like, it is what it is. This is what it is, right? It's so fascinating. And I love the connections you've made.
There's not slang, but it's fascinating in the world we live in music. There's a lot of mantra rap these days. And so while it's not necessarily slang, these mantras are being put to modern beats and, these new expressions that are really like keeping this language alive. It's so amazing that this is like, Sanskrit's recognized as the oldest language on the planet. And it feels probably more alive today than it's probably been for a while. Just with, like the amount of mantra music and Sanskrit and chanting and devotional music that people can access through Spotify or Pandora and YouTube. It's like it's amazing.
Yeah. And it really does something to me. Like I listen to a lot more mantra music now and I was never ever interested, but it puts me, it puts me in a space. I'll put some on and I'll journal, or I just listen to it when I want to be really mellowed out. And it's, yeah. So again, can't speak to all of like the science as to why, but it does something.
Mm. And I think all of us, recognize that. We all, I think most of us know that music is healing, or music has the ability for us to tap into emotions.
Yes.
One of my personal missions, though, is like music is so beautiful, and like the amount of love poured into lyrics, and like so much music. I think I don't want to use the word wasted. I definitely don't. All music is healing, but like a lot of the music played at bars and festivals, it's a lot of that essence is lost. And maybe lost isn't the right word, but it's a very different experience than when you take music and you make it very intentional and you go, this is how you open up to receive this music and what the effects. So like, it's like the difference if you're into plant medicines, right? If you take some mushrooms at a party versus if you have a ceremonial psilocybin experience, they're so different. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been experimenting with this, and I want to tell you about what we've been doing. It's really fascinating. So typically, my standard classes are yoga music, yoga themed, um, and for about maybe a year now, we're in this really amazing music hall in Redmond, not so far. And it used to be an old church, but now it's a music hall, and they get big music acts that come through. So it inspired me to combine this Kriya yoga and sound bath with music that lives in our body. So one example is Pink Floyd and The Void. So I have an amazing musician partner that plays Pink Floyd and all this other music just incredibly well. And we open up to the lyrics, after we've opened up our body through breath work and some silence and movement, we open up, and then Pink Floyd comes in and says, "Welcome to," and it's just like, and it gives like the full chance for music to land. And we've done this with Grateful Dead and Beatles and Trevor Hall. We've got Pearl Jam and Led Zeppelin coming up too. But there's like these
Wow.
lyrics are so alive in many of us, and to encourage it out through some yoga movements and practices, it's been super fun. So I wanted to share that.
I love that idea because it feels fun, and to have like music that takes you somewhere different than just like, because you're probably like expecting mantra in a setting like that, and then you have like rock or metal, and that just feels like it would really be an interesting experience to feel that like kind of seep through you in a different way. That's like super cool.
And
The
I
effect,
feel as though, oh, go ahead.
yeah,
You
I just
go.
want to say, like the effects have been really different. Speaking to participants too, it's like somatically something very different is happening because we've listened to so much of this music. I probably heard Pink Floyd, hundreds of times. Um, and there's something different than introducing a mantra that, yeah, maybe your past life remembers that chant, but
Mhm.
you didn't try drugs for the first time at that concert. You didn't experience with that love of your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Well,
So
it's so
cool.
fascinating because Maggie, you and I have talked about this before on many episodes. And just about like creativity. And I'm thinking about the way you're sharing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like to open up the body and receiving that sound is to me the closest you could be to how an artist or a musician, the vibrational frequency of the music they put together, how they wanted you to experience it. Does that make sense? So like it's kind of a hard line to follow, but like I think, right, yes, the music becomes diluted to some extent when it's like, yes, we're experiencing it at a bar or whatever, but I think the integrity of that music is still there. Like the
Mhm,
current of that music is still there as the musician crafted it, right? I don't think
mhm,
there are definitely like people who are like, I'm going to be pop, but even in their art and their craft and their creativity, there is a vibrational frequency as they create. And I feel like the way that you are opening and expanding people in your container in order for them to experience the closest you can ever be to that artist's, like the purest of what they were trying to put out. It seems to me that's what's occurring almost, because I'm like, yes, I think like you're getting their authenticity and their intention. And I don't know, like I think about that a lot as like myself, an artist in a different modality in painting, right? Like I think a lot about like that piece that Rick Rubin really organizes us around in his work, where he says like, right, like there's you as the artist that creates, then there's like something that happens and it becomes something as you put it out. And then there's like a third aspect of what the person who receives it receives, right? And there's like those, like that dimension or that spectrum. So it's like, you really can't maintain your integrity. Like you can only know like what you put out is put out, and then it is what it is, and then it becomes the eye of the beholder, and then it becomes, and it creates meaning from there. It's not really meaning from you, if that makes sense. But I'm like, wait a minute, except maybe in music, because of the frequency of it and kind of how you are creating space for someone to be close to that origin of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is like super cool. Super, super cool.
I love it. Okay, we are winding down. The end of this. I know. And I want to add, we are going to have a little sound bit from Kevin following the close of this lovely conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all that you did. We have one closing question that we love to ask before we will share where people can find you. But what have you been noticing this week?
I've been noticing the stripping away, the letting go, the simplifying, the cycle of death and creation. And and that cycle, even though it's omnipresent, it's not always easy, but it is omnipresent.
Well, that's another episode. I love that. I mean, wow, that's so fascinating to even like, you've now spurred my observation of that. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be trying to be observant around that too, because that's like, yeah, so that's deep and good. Thank you for that. And I know, so yes, stay tuned after we close out here for, I don't know what my sound is doing. My voice is like going all over the place, but here for it. A sound experience that Kevin will masterfully put together for us, and hopefully will take you into a different brainwave state. So definitely make sure you hang on to hear that. But Kevin, how can people meet you, and where can they meet you after our time here comes to a close?
Yes, the best place to connect with me is my website, soundshala.com. That's soundshala.com. And check us out on Spotify. We have our own podcast, and I also have our Gong Bath meditations, so you can listen to what we do. And you can also learn about my children's book, Om, by visiting soundshala.com. So thank you.
Which, Kevin, I didn't tell you, but I'm telling you now because I'm like going to put a little, I bought that book, read it to my children, the 7 M's. So good. Everybody loved it. We read it as a family, and it really resonated. And I really appreciate what you ignited within us with that book.
You didn't even tell me that.
That I ordered and bought it. Yeah, like instantly, as soon as I talked to him last time. I was like, yeah, it's already done. It's been bought.
Oh, sweet.
I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Well, thank you. And thank you, listeners, for listening.
Are we going to keep it rolling? Are we going to start and stop again? We're going to keep it rolling?
Oh, do you want to do it? Oh.
No.